In the warm glow of the setting sun, Antonio sat on the porch, his thoughts heavy with the events of the past few months.
His once peaceful life had been turned upside down since Clara and her daughter, Laura, had come to live with him.
The sound of laughter drew his attention, and he looked up to see Laura playing with her dolls in the yard. Her innocent joy, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had brought them here. Clara joined him, handing him a cup of coffee.
"She's so resilient," she said softly, her eyes following Laura's movements.
Antonio nodded, taking a sip. "She gets it from you," he replied, his voice filled with admiration.
"You've been through so much, and yet here you are, standing strong." Clara smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I had to be strong."
For her,
the weight of her words hung in the air, and Antonio felt a surge of protectiveness.
"You're both safe here," he said firmly.
"I won't let anything happen to you." Clara reached out, placing a hand on his arm.
"Thank you, Antonio, for everything."
"I don't know what we would have done without you." As the days turned into weeks, the three of them settled into a new routine. Antonio would go to work, leaving Clara to care for Laura and manage the household. Despite the underlying tension, there were moments of genuine happiness and laughter that made the hardships seem distant.
One evening, as they were sitting down to dinner, the phone rang.
Antonio answered, his expression growing serious as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to Clara, his face pale.
"It's about Laura's stepfather, Marcos," he said quietly. "He's been released on bail." Clara's face drained of color. "What does that mean? Is he coming here?"
Antonio shook his head. "I don't know,
but we need to be prepared." The news cast a shadow over the household. Antonio took measures to ensure their safety, installing locks and security cameras.
He also contacted a lawyer to discuss their options. One night, as Antonio sat alone in the living room, Helena wheeled herself in, her face set in a determined expression. "Antonio, we need to talk," she said, her tone softer but no less insistent.
Antonio looked up, feeling a weariness settle over him. "What is it, Emma?" Helena took a deep breath, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "I know you're trying to do what's right, but this isn't sustainable."
"We can't live like this, in constant tension, then try to understand, Emma," Antonio replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "Laura is my daughter. Clara needs our help. This isn't just about us anymore." Helena's eyes softened just a fraction. "I just don't want to lose you, Antonio."
"You've always been my rock."
"You won't lose me, Emma," Antonio said, his voice firm but gentle.
"But I need you to trust me. Trust that I'm doing the right thing for all of us."
Helena was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right, Antonio.
I'll try.
But I won't promise it will be easy." Antonio gave a small, relieved smile.
"That's all I'm asking for." As Helena wheeled herself back to her room, Antonio felt a flicker of hope.
It would be a long road, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to coexist.
The house was still heavy with unresolved tension, but the first step toward reconciliation had been taken.
Antonio returned to the living room, where Clara and Laura were waiting. He sat down next to them, feeling the warmth of their presence.
They were a family, bound by love and determination, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The evening air was thick with tension as Antonio tried to focus on the book in his hands.
Laura and Clara were playing quietly in the living room, their laughter a brief respite from the underlying strain that had settled over the house.
Suddenly, a loud, insistent banging on the front door shattered the fragile peace.
Antonio's heart jumped.
He exchanged a weary glance with Clara, who instantly gathered Laura into her arms.
"Stay here," he said, his voice low and firm. He moved to the door, every step heavy with dread. When Antonio opened the door, his worst fears were realized.
Marcos, Laura's stepfather, stood there, swaying drunkenly, his eyes wild with anger. "Where is she?"
Marcos slurred, pushing past Antonio.
"Where's my wife?
Where's my daughter?" Antonio stepped in front of him, blocking his path.
"You need to leave, Marcos. They're safe here. You're not taking them anywhere." Marcos's face twisted in rage.
"Safe from me.
I'm their family. You have no right." He lunged forward, grabbing Laura, who screamed and clung to Clara. Clara cried out, trying to shield Laura.
"Let her go, Marcos."
"You're hurting her."
Antonio's instincts took over. He grabbed Marcos's arm, wrenching it away from Laura.
"That's enough," he shouted. "Get out of my house." The two men struggled, the living room erupting into chaos. Marcos swung wildly, landing a glancing blow on Antonio's jaw. Pain flared, but Antonio's resolve only hardened.
He pushed back, using all his strength to subdue Marcos.
They crashed into the coffee table, sending magazines and cups flying. Helena, drawn by the noise, wheeled herself into the room, her eyes widening in shock as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the commotion. Marcos, momentarily distracted, looked over at Helena. "Stay out of this, old woman. This is between me and them." Helena's eyes narrowed. "Marcos, you need to leave, now." Marcos sneered, struggling against Antonio's grip. "You're all against me. Even you, Helena? After everything I did for you?" Antonio froze, his grip tightening. "What are you talking about?" Marcos laughed bitterly. "Your precious mother.
She's the one who pushed Clara into marrying me. Paid her family off, all to keep her away from you." Clara gasped, her eyes filling with tears.
"Helena, is that true?" Helena's face was a mask of cold defiance. "I did what I had to do to protect my son."
"You were ruining his life." Antonio's mind reeled.
You did this."
"You forced Clara into that marriage?"
Helena's eyes blazed. "She was leading you astray. You had a future, a bright one, and she was dragging you down." Antonio felt a surge of anger unlike anything he had ever felt before. "You had no right," he said, his voice trembling with fury.
"No right to destroy our lives like that." Marcos took advantage of Antonio's distraction, breaking free and lunging for Clara again.
But Antonio was quicker.
He tackled Marcos to the ground, pinning him there.
"Get out," he growled, "and if you ever come near them again, I will call the police." Helena watched, her face pale, as Marcos finally stumbled to his feet, defeated. He cast one last venomous look at Clara and Laura before staggering out the door. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Helena's labored breathing.
Clara knelt down to comfort Laura, who was sobbing uncontrollably.
"It's okay, sweetie. He's gone. You're safe now." Antonio stood up, his body aching from the fight, but his mind sharper than ever.
He turned to Helena, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow.
"How could you, Emoen? How could you do this to us?" Helena looked away, her defiance crumbling into something more fragile.
"I thought I was doing the right thing.
"I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me."
Antonio's voice was incredulous. "You tore apart the only family I ever wanted. You forced Clara into a nightmare." Clara stood, still holding Laura close.
"We need to leave, Antonio. We can't stay here." Antonio shook his head.
"No, you're not going anywhere.
This is your home now, and I'll make sure you're safe." Helena's eyes filled with tears.
"Antonio, please."
"I'm still your mother. I need you." Antonio looked at her, the woman who had raised him, now a stranger in so many ways. "You need to understand, Emoen. Things have changed. I have to do what's right for Clara and Laura. They come first now." Helena nodded slowly, her tears falling freely. "I understand," she whispered. I didn't know it would end up like this."
Antonio turned to Clara, his expression softening. "You and Laura are staying. We'll figure this out together." Clara nodded, relief washing over her.
"Thank you, Antonio, for everything." As the night drew on, the house slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy.
Antonio, Clara, and Laura spent the next few days trying to rebuild their sense of normalcy.
The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the breakfast table where Antonio sat with Clara and Laura.
Antonio poured a glass of orange juice for Laura, who was coloring quietly beside him.
"How about we go to the park today?" he suggested, his tone light but filled with hope.
Laura looked up, her eyes brightening. "Can we, Mommy?"
Clara smiled, though her smile carried the weight of their recent struggles.
"Of course, sweetheart."
"That sounds like a wonderful idea." Helena watched from her place at the table, her expression unreadable. She sipped her tea slowly, feeling the growing distance between her and Antonio. The realization that she was no longer the center of his world gnawed at her, leaving her feeling isolated and powerless. As the day progressed, small gestures began to weave a new fabric of trust and connection among them. Antonio helped Laura with her homework, his patience and encouragement bringing smiles and laughter. Clara cooked dinner, finding comfort in familiar routines, while Antonio set the table, occasionally exchanging playful glances with her. In the living room, Valeria, the nurse, arrived to assist Helena. Antonio and Clara welcomed her warmly, grateful for her help. Valeria's presence brought a sense of normalcy and stability to their lives, something they all desperately needed. That evening, after dinner, they all gathered in the living room. Antonio and Clara sat close, with Laura nestled between them, her head resting on Clara's shoulder. Helena watched them, feeling a pang of regret for the choices she had made.
Antonio broke the silence, his voice steady and calm. I know this has been hard for you.
For all of us, but we need to find a way to move forward together. Helena nodded, her eyes moist with unshed tears.
I know, Antonio. I want that too.
I need to learn how to let go. Clara reached out, taking Helena's hand in hers.
We can do this together.
We're all family here. Laura looked up at Helena, her innocent eyes filled with hope. We can be happy, Grandma.
All of us. Helena's heart softened, and she squeezed Laura's hand gently.
Yes, darling, we can be happy. The weeks that followed were not without their challenges, but slowly they began to heal.
Helena worked on mending her relationship with Antonio and Clara, making an effort to support them and be a positive presence in their lives. Antonio focused on providing a safe and loving environment for Laura and Clara, determined to build the family they all deserved.
One sunny afternoon, Antonio and Clara took Laura to the park as promised. They played on the swings, laughed on the slides, and enjoyed a picnic under the shade of a large oak tree.
As they watched Laura run around, her laughter echoing through the park, Antonio felt a deep sense of contentment. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft.
Thank you for everything, Antonio, for giving us a chance at happiness. Antonio kissed her forehead, his heart full. We're in this together, Clara, always. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Antonio, Clara, and Laura walked home hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. Back at home, Helena watched them from the window, a small smile playing on her lips.
She realized that this new chapter, though different from what she had envisioned, was filled with possibilities and hope. She knew it would take time to fully mend the wounds of the past, but with love and determination, they could build a brighter future together.
And so, in the warmth of their shared love and the strength of their renewed bonds, they found the courage to move forward, creating a new story of family, resilience, and unbreakable ties.